We're going to discuss today how to detect tomorrow's champions thanks to data. So my name is Charlotte. I've been working for Arianeo for almost a year now. I used to work for event teams of French racetracks, and I also spent some time in a stud farm in Normandy before joining Arioneo. I am now a data success manager. So basically my job is to follow our customer accounts to help them with the analysis of the training data that they gather with our products. And that's why I've been working with Byron for a few months now. We had great talks together and great discussion about sports science and about data with his company activity. And that's why I wanted to share this with you. Maybe, Byron, you can just introduce yourself, introduce your company, and how you are used to work with data to assess the young horse's potential.
Thanks, Charlotte. Yeah, my name is Byron Rogers. I am managing partner of Performance Genetics. We started Performance Genetics back in 2011, and it's a company that does analytics on horses. We gather data at yearling stages and at 2-year-olds before horses race, and have a database of over 10,000 horses. Essentially, we gather 3 elements to look at how that relates to racehorse performance. We take an M-mode measurement of the cardio using an ultrasound. We take some biomechanical measurements. We use various methods to do that, and we do take some DNA markers to check on how far the horse wants to run and those sorts of things. As I said, we've been doing this since 2011, and we've had we work for various clients around the world, some in America, some in Australia, some over in Europe. One of the customers that we have, or one of the clients that we have, is Star Bloodstock, which is a breeze up consigner in Europe. We do the buying for that group, and we've had some success recently with horses like A.R. who won the Norfolk and was a very good 3-year-old sprinter. Malabath, who ran this year, won a Group 2 race in France and ran second in the Breeders' Cup Juvenile Fillies Turf. And Duhail is another galloper in France there who is in training for Andre Fabre and is a nice horse and a Group 2 level horse. They're the sort of horses that we're trying to buy for Star Bloodstock, and we obviously use various metrics to do that. And one of the reasons we're using Arianeo is to give ourselves that sort of feedback loop of the data that we collect at yearling sales, and how does that relate to what they do on the racetrack in their early training, and how we can actually use that to sort of feedback loop of information. And it also is very helpful for us in terms of deciding what sales and how best to manage the young horse as he's getting ready to get to the races.
Yeah, it's an amazing work that you're doing with the Equimeter. So maybe just a few words about the Equimeter before starting and go deeper in the presentation. So Equimeter is the sensor that Arianeo created more than 2 years ago now. It gathers cardio, GPS, and locomotion data mainly on the race horses. It has 2 very precise electrodes that collect the electrocardiogram of the horse during training on every training session. So it's an amazing tool to follow the evolution of the horses during training, and also to prevent issues. We've been working with more than 300 trainers, vets, and great racing institutions in 35 countries. Yeah, that's Byron has been using the Equimeter for a while now, so he knows it well, and maybe that's why we're gonna just talk about those 3 main topics today. So first, we're gonna start with how recovery parameters differ with young horses as opposed to fully mature horses. So we're going to see why it's not always useful to look at the same parameters for mature horses and young horses. Then we're going to see how works at sub-maximal effort can also tell you something about ability. And then we'll end with how early it's possible to detect innate stride length and frequency characteristics. So it's more about the locomotion profile of the horses. So if you're ready, Byron, maybe the floor is yours.
I think we have to go to the next. Yeah. We'll go to the next slide. Yeah. So first of all, I think there's a couple of things we need to talk about. The first thing is with our data, we are, when we're buying yearlings for star bloodstock, we're specifically buying sprinters, sprinter milers. So some of the things I talk about here today in regards to horses that want to get a further distance may not specifically apply. I think it should, but it's something to consider. The first thing you need to know with young horses is that they don't have the same recovery patterns. The reason for this is twofold. Is firstly, the first thing, you're adapting two systems, the cardiovascular system and the neurological and musculoskeletal parameters of the horse when you first start to work a horse. The cardiovascular system is something that adapts very quickly. You can get a young horse to have its cardiovascular adaptations within sort of 6 weeks, 6 to 8 weeks. You can actually do it in a swimming pool. Like if you swam a horse for 6 weeks, you would get the cardiac adaptations. So the cardio actually moves and adapts faster than it does in terms of the neurological and musculoskeletal parameters with young horses. The issue you've got in terms of as you're developing a young horse is that while that cardio does adapt very quickly, there's a one-to-one linking in terms of stride frequency and breath. So in terms of the horse, as it takes a stride, it breathes. And because of that, and because very early on, you have that difference with the neurological and musculoskeletal parameters as that horse is adapting to a rider being on board. What ends up happening is that as much as the cardio does adapt, the recovery from work does not coincide there's not that natural coinciding of the information between the two systems that you see in older horses. So if we go to the next slide there, Charlotte, we can sort of discuss some examples of what what we're talking about here. This is a horse here. This horse was quite a good horse, a moderately good horse. What we found, and when we're looking at this data the Arianeo data from these young horses, is because of the fact that the adaptations are different, is that we have never found really good data metrics in terms of the effort required of the fast recovery and the heart rate after 15 minutes. They're two of the variables that you're able to view when you look at the Arianeo data. But just with those young horses, we've just never found that is actually that they never recover. They never have a fast recovery. Their heart rate is always most of the time very high. The one variable that we have found that's been a very good indication of sort of the effort of the work has been this time to 120 beats per minute. Some of those sometimes with the variations in work, you get some variation between, say, sort of 60 to 120 seconds seems to be a fairly easy work. And once you get above about 120 seconds in terms of time to 120 beats per minute, that's a fairly stressful work. If you want to go on to the next slide there, Charlotte. So and this also applies to horses with different heart rates. Here's a horse here whose max heart rate is very low. He's a horse that basically is a 210, 212 sort of maximal heart rate. And that's one of the things we do very early in training in the horses with our young horses, with the breeze up horses. So we try to establish that max heart rate fairly early in the year. You can do that quite easily. But once the horse is reasonably fit, is just a sort of like almost like a skip up of 1 furlong, skip up at a good speed. That will actually generate a max heart rate, because the horse isn't 100% fit. and it'll be a big effort for it to do that sort of work. So we try to generate that maximal heart rate. We give it 2 works to actually find out what that point is. But as you can see here, over a period of time, that sort of stays fairly constant. But again, the fast recovery and the heart rate after 15 minutes aren't good indicators of the stress of the work, because they just don't recover to that level. Even with this low heart rate, obviously the variation to the time to 120 beats per minute still exists. You can see that work there where it took 245 seconds for the horse to recover. We then took that was actually quite a strong work, but we then took the time, the next couple of works there to give the horse a bit of an easier time to get through to things. If you just want to go to the next slide there. Sure. And this horse here, this third horse here, is actually a very good horse. And you can see that last one there, we've put the square around the 224 seconds. That was her final work at the Curragh before she went to the breeze up sales. So despite the fact that she'd been in work a long time, she was a very relatively fit horse. That last work did stress her a lot, and we didn't do an awful lot with her. After that, we just did some very easy work for her before she went to the sales. So that's the sort of where our experience with this has been, is that the fast recovery and the heart rate after 15 minutes aren't very good metrics, because of the fact that these young horses are making this adaptation in terms of the way that they're moving in their strides, and that has a very big influence on the recovery rates. The other thing which I need to mention is that we do this very consistently in terms of where we work the horses and how we work the horses. Very early on, you often get data that looks, very, they're outlier data, basically very strange data in terms of you don't get the consistency of it, because you get a young horse who is, new to the environment. They're doing things that they've not done before. They get excited very easily. So getting them into a routine, and obviously we get them out. We have our horses up at the Curragh there for Star Bloodstock, getting them out on the Curragh very early, getting them to see things, getting them exposed to a lot of things before you actually start to take some data, or before you actually make conclusions from the data is fairly important. So that's one other thing to mention there in terms of gathering the data in young horses. You have to be very consistent about how you when you actually use the data. If you go to the next slide.
Yeah, you can't rely on the same parameters that you're used to look at for more mature horses, because usually when you look at the heart rate after 15 minutes, you can see how fit is the horse. This is the main parameters that we look at for the mature horses. And obviously you can see there is a huge difference, even if those parameters are very, very stable every time the same. Can see the difference with this time to 120 BPM, and that's great. That's a great way to analyze. So now we're going to talk about how works at sub-maximal effort can also tell you something about ability. So you're going to explain us what sub-maximal effort is, I think.
Yes. So we do a number of works, obviously, as you've seen in that last couple of slides, as towards getting the horses fit to the breeze up sales. We do a lot of work at sub-maximal speeds. When I talk about sub-maximal speeds, we're sort of talking about around about 57, 58, 59 kilometers an hour. 24 to 25 seconds for a 2 furlong work, or 12.5 seconds for a furlong. There is a relationship between the submaximal velocity and your heart rate that we've found, and actually it's in papers that's been published. And as I said earlier on, we generally try to establish this max heart rate after 2 works where a strong effort required over a furlong. You can do that fairly early, like once you've actually got the horse reasonably fit, and as I said, that max heart rate will be found fairly easily, because of the fact that you're working the horse, it's not 100% fit, but it's fit enough to do the work. but the variation exists between, like you can see down the bottom there, between two horses. And I think this is really important to understand, is that a lot of the times when you're working horses, if you don't know this max heart rate, you can actually do a lot more work than you think you do, especially with a horse with a low max heart rate. We had one this year who was that's him there, the colt there, with a very low maximal heart rate. He did find his work, when we worked him initial stages, he found the works a lot. What on the data we thought it was very easy, but it turns out it wasn't. He was actually making a fair effort to get there. So we were using a lot of that anaerobic area with him. So just be very aware when you first start as to establishing those max heart rates is actually quite important. If we go to the next slide. I'll show you three horses here. All three of them are actually quite good horses. They're both aren't as good as these three. The jet setting colt is a horse called Alvarez. He's had 3 starts, 2 wins. He's 90 rated. For Tom Clow, he looks like being a good sprinter for next year, this year, I should say. The Fadaha filly's obviously Malabath, who's a Group 2 winner. And the Miramont colt is a horse with Stuart Williams called Wyvern, who ran to 90 the other day. So, as I said, at these sub-maximal speeds, you can get some very good data. And I'll just actually, I tell you what, can I share my screen just really quickly and show something, or is it?
Of course.
Let me see if I can get my screen here. Can you see that?
Yep.
So here's a horse here. This horse is not much good. He's a 60 rated horse. This is a work here he did in the sort of middle of March. This is a very standard work for us. It's a 2 furlong, 25 second. You can see from the data here, it's not been a very hard work, 10% anaerobic. As I said, it's all Akara, and you can sort of see it just works up there, and it's fairly straightforward work. One of the things we use, and I don't know, this is within your settings of Arianeo, I find this very interesting, is putting the speed and the heart rate together and the stride length and stride frequency in one view. We can see here it's not a very stressful work. His heart rate never, the red line there, he's never getting above 210. His acceleration through there, he's never going above sort of 57, 58 kilometers an hour. So it's not a very hard work. What is noteworthy is down here, as where you sort of see this stride, the relationship between stride length and stride frequency, and how the horse does this is actually quite illuminating very early on in when you're starting to assess these young horses. The horse will start off here. If you look at the orange line there, he's using his stride frequency to generate speed. So he's turning over his strides, as he starts his gallop. Once he gets to around about sort of like that 30 mark, where he's going 30 kilometers an hour, the horse should even out, and in terms of like his stride length should lengthen, and his stride frequency should sort of flatten out. This horse is not much good, and this is why he's not, it tells you why. Basically, he is using his stride length the whole time to generate his speed. If we look at another horse, the other horse, this is Malabath, same sort of work, same distance, same level of effort in terms of anaerobic effort. She's asked to do the exact same things, the same jockey riding her. You can see her once she starts down here, once she starts her initial acceleration where she's using the frequency, it levels out, and you get this effect here where the stride length and stride frequency are linearly, as the speed is increasing up here, they're going together. This is a biomechanically efficient horse, and we see this a lot with these horses and Wyvern, the other horses I mentioned there. But what that allows this horse to do as compared to this horse is sustain that gallop at that speed. Like she's basically doing a linear relationship between her stride length and her stride frequency. And this horse here is not. He's actually having to use his stride frequency to create speed, and continues to use stride frequency relative to stride length to create speed. When you've got that one-to-one coupling of breath to stride frequency, that horse goes into oxygen debt a lot quicker. So at these submaximal speeds, you can start to identify these horses that aren't, really sort of very athletic, because of the fact that you have that disjoint between the stride frequency and stride length. Can I? You can go back to I'll stop sharing now.
Yeah, perfect. That's very interesting. Thank you so much. So here we are.
Yeah, so that then manifests itself in a couple of ways here. You can sort of see from this data here, the main two columns there is the highest, measured acceleration. These horses basically have gone, the jet setting and the Fadaha in particular, have gone the same speed, max speed. They basically did the exact same time. But you can sort of see duration at speed at 55 kilometers an hour. She can hold that duration. She can get to that speed above 50, the time that she has above that 55 kilometers an hour, because of the fact that she's so biomechanically efficient, and the distance that she's able to travel because of the fact that she's so biomechanically efficient in that work. So some of these submaximal efforts and abilities, as I say, when you're doing sort of 2 furlongs in 24, 25 seconds, you do get a very good sense, especially looking at that chart there, where you're looking at the stride frequency and stride length, and you can get a very good sense of the horses that are just naturally more efficient.
Thank you so much. That's a perfect way to slide to the next subject, which is more about the locomotor profile of the horses. Oh no, maybe you want to comment this first?
No. I mean, basically that's pretty much cover that. Those are our last two examples there. I mean, that's what we're talking about. That variation of the heart rate. The more importantly is the stride length and stride frequencies. How in those submaximal efforts are these horses generating their speed? And we see the difference between a horse that's a 60 rated horse and a horse that's a 110 rated horse, is that they're after that initial initial effort to get to a speed of about 30 kilometers or more, the good horses have that sort of linear relationship between their stride length and stride frequency, whereas the less good horses will use stride frequency way more to generate their speed.
Yeah, and when we look at those graphs, we can't really see the difference. I guess sometimes the fitness level may be the same for two horses, but if you look deeper in the speed abilities and everything, you see they can sustain the speed at that submaximal maximum heart rate level much easier than others, and that's really fascinating.
Yeah.
Okay, so maybe now we can discuss a little more deeper about this locomotor profile and how early it's possible to detect innate stride length and stride frequency characteristics, because we know that usually at the beginning of, young horses usually have more a sprinter profile than others, but you can already try to see what they're going to do in the future.
Yeah, so stride frequency and stride length, obviously, are the two variables that are measurable with Arianeo. There is the stride frequency seems to be, in my experience, more innate. It is, it's a biomechanical feature. When you're looking at the horses, it's very hard to sort of say, okay, this horse is going to have a long stride, or this is not. In theory, when we look at yearlings, and we're looking at the way that they walk, we like that long, loose walk, and in theory that has a correlation to stride frequency. Our experience with that is it's actually been only moderate. I haven't, the walk of a yearling seems to, you get paid a lot of money for that in the yearling sales, but it actually only has a moderate correlation to stride frequency. That said, I think the frequency is from the time the horse is born, basically, because of the fact that it is so tied to so much tied to the breath of the horse that when they're running around in the paddock as a young horse, that stride frequency seems to be something that they, for whatever reasons, it gets tied to an innate ability. So we do see that at slower paces we can sort of get an idea as to what the stride frequency will be like at full speed and as an adult horse. As the horse gets fitter and as the horse sort of learns how to sort of basically put its feet down when you're teaching it as a young horse and doing some faster works with it, the stride length varies much more. And that's been, that's the one thing I've sort of, we're sort of still working on now, as to sort of how does that, how and why that occurs exactly, in terms of, if you've got a horse standing up in front of you and you're looking at the biomechanical features of the horse, how does that stride length vary, and why does it vary as much as it does? So we don't have quite the data yet to sort of answer that question, but it, certainly from the viewpoint of stride frequency, but it seems to be something that's sort of innate into them. So, and if we go on to the next slide there, we can sort of see some horses here, a couple of horses here, where you can actually get an idea, what their stride frequency and stride length is going to be. Basically, our experience has been it's stride frequency at 45. You can use actually stride frequency at 55 kilometers an hour. We use it at 45. And that seems to have a pretty much a demarcation line around about 2, in terms of the frequency, around about 2.25. Seems to be that anything above that is going to be a high turnover horse, and anything below that 2.25 is going to be a lower frequency horse. And that, seems to, and the same thing with that stride length. So anything, above 5.5 ends up being a longer striding horse. Anything below 5.5 ends up being a shorter striding horse. That doesn't necessarily mean that they're not going to be good horses. If we look at that jet setting horse there, they've got the data on him. We've got 3 readings there, one in February, March, and April. And he's pretty much consistently from the time back in February when we first sort of give him a little bit, go fast enough to sort of work out where he is. You get an idea as to that this horse has not got a long stride. And if we go on to if you go on to the next slide there, it doesn't necessarily mean he's not a good horse. If you want to just move to the next slide there, Charlotte. Okay. This is him as an actual racehorse, is Alvarez. So that is the jet setting horse there. And you see there on the right hand side, these are actually measurements of him at the racetrack, thanks to total performance data. He's got that's only a 6 point, was that 24? It's about 6.8 meter stride at full speed. But again, it's got a very high stride frequency. So, going back, as I say, the demarcation line for those sorts of longer strider, shorter striding horses that you can actually get the data on when they're not going at full maximal speed or anything like that, you can get a good idea. And we use that in various ways. I do like to group horses when we're working them. I do like to group them by stride frequency. That's just one of the things we try to do. Is I've found that the jockeys, if we've got, say, 3 horses working and they're all lower stride frequency horses or higher stride frequency horses, I find that the jockeys will work them actually better together than if you've got one that's having to work, if you've got a high turnover horse, a high frequency horse, even if the stride lengths are slightly different, that if you are making them do things against another horse that's got a different frequency, that they tend to do things that the jockey tends to ask them to do things that they probably shouldn't be doing. So I tend to sort of group them. When we first start off and do a little bit of work with them, we start to group them into working groups with the horses of similar stride frequency, because I think that the jockeys actually end up working the horses appropriately together, and not do things that get speedy cuts or various things like that if they're working a bit too fast for their natural stride frequency.
Okay, thank you so much. That's been very, very interesting. Those examples are perfect. Maybe we're gonna try to see the questions. If you have some question, it's the time to ask them. I think so. If Byron do not have any more info to share for now.
Whatever. If someone asks the question, I'll share anything. I mean, I'll show them anything or any of the data. If anyone's interested in any of the data that we gather or anything like that, I'm happy to show them while we're here.
Great. So I think we have one question yet. At what age the recovery heart rate becomes reliable? When you say young horses, what age are you talking about?
So yeah, we basically take them through. This is a spring 2-year-old. So taking them through till May of their 2-year-old year will be the last set of group of horses. We said we generally don't find it at all reliable up to that period. So I would say, I don't know what the answer is because we don't collect data on young horses past sort of May of their 2-year-old year. I don't know the answer is exactly when it becomes reliable, but it's certainly not in the spring of their 2-year-old year. I think you're better off using the 120 beats per minute as your guide of how stressful that work was for that young horse. I don't have the answer to the exact question there.
To what extent do you see stride frequency change with age or condition, like going on or steepness or of gallop track? Sorry.
So that's the one, Tom. I think that we try to keep everything reduce as many variables as we can. So we try to keep them working on the same track and sort of keep the variables down as much as we can so that we get an idea as to what's going on. One of the things we do is we use, as I say, the data on that stride frequency and stride length to decide what sales we're going to go to. So I generally find that if I'm taking a horse for Star Bostock, if Matt and I are deciding what sales to go to, if we've got a short striding horse, we tend not to want to go to the Craven sale or any of the sales at Newmarket, because that is the last furlong of that is up a hill basically. We find longer striding horses do better at that sale, just because of the way they go. And the shortish or shorter striding horses or horses with higher frequencies, we tend to go to flatter tracks. So you go to Doncaster, you'll go to places like that. So the frequency at which they change, or stride frequency change with age. It doesn't, like, as I said, I don't think it you can get sort of minor gradations of change in terms of say Alvarez, like he changed slightly in terms of, but he was always, if you have some sort of demarcation line to say, okay, this is a short striding horse, he was never not a short striding horse. He was always was. And then reverses at Malabath, she was always a longer striding horse. So we just tend to keep sort of groups rather than sort of saying, is he going to change? They don't change from being a short striding, a high frequency horse to a low frequency horse. That just doesn't happen. As I say, I think it's innate to them. Caroline.
I think we have two questions that are kind of the same. What cardiovascular parameters do you measure, and when are you collecting pre-purchase data, DNA, ultrasounds, etc.? Is that at the sale or on farm before sale? And how often do you find vendors are allowing you to collect such data?
Okay, Tom's asked a follow-up question there. Yes, I do find longer striding horses are better at uphill finishes, because of the fact that they, an uphill finish, you've got to take more strides. And as I say, that one-to-one linking between stride frequency and breath. Horses with shorter strides, horses with have to take more breaths, go into oxygen debt faster, that sort of stuff. So I do think that Arianeo would help you with race planning in that way. I do think that you could actually use the data properly to sort of say, okay, that horse, that type of horse won't go well. We've got horses. One of the horses we had 2 years ago had a short stride, but he could blast out to a maximal speed of something ridiculous. And he was very good at those tighter turning smaller tracks. So I do think, Tom, to answer your question, I think you could. What cardiovascular parameters do you measure? Okay, this will be fun. Charlotte, do you want to share?
Yeah,
Let me see if I can do this for you. Where are we here? All right. All right, I'll get it. Let me just get organized here. 1 second. I'll get a couple of videos here. 1 second. Okay. Okay. Can we see that?
Yeah, perfect.
Okay. Yeah, okay. Can you still see me? Yes, no?
Yeah.
You can still see me? Okay. So, can you see this Coke can?
Yeah.
All right, so let's imagine this is the heart. And this is a simplification of the whole thing, but let's imagine that this is the heart. This is what the ultrasound looks like. Well, you can't really see it there, but now you can. So what it does is we're taking basically a beam, we're cutting a beam straight across part of it, taking a segment of it. So if I sort of turned it like that, you'd be looking at it like this. So that would be the heart. And we're taking the ultrasound is just taking a shot straight across and splitting the heart. Effectively what we're looking for, if we look at this, hey, that's not so good.
Perfect, that's good.
Okay. Let's try that again. Okay. So this is the cardio here this is actually Malabath as a yearling. We took this, as she was selling as a yearling up Tally Ho. So this is the ultrasound. That's the point that's coming through here. Is taking the slice of the cardio right there. This is basically what we're looking for here. And if we watch it just sort of play again, we call this a bullseye cardio. And the reason we call it a bullseye cardio is that when it's actually moving, it's a circular, heart. When it's actually moving, it squeezes into a circular heart. So, as I say, that's Malabath there. I'll give you a couple of other samples here just to. Well, did that go off my share screen or not?
No, I think maybe that's the same. I don't know.
Can you? What have you got now?
We got another herd.
You got Hestia?
I can't see actually the name of the
different heart.
I only, like a quick idea, and I can't see. No,
let me just resume. Now can you see?
It's not changing anything.
No. Okay. Let me try it again here. 1 sec.
Yeah.
Let me try it again here. 1 sec. Can you see that now? No. 1 second.
No worries. Everything's fine.
Can you see that now? Is that better?
Yeah, perfect.
So you can see Hestia?
Yeah.
Okay. So this is another horse here, same concept. Taking a beam there through there. And again, you want it to be going down into a circle like that. And that's what we look for. And this is a simplification of it. We basically, using an M-mode ultrasound there to do that. We use a machine learning algorithm that actually breaks it down into a frame by frame and sort of analyzes each frame. This is actually Armour, who won the Malcolm Stakes this year. So that's his cardio, and that's that's a similar sort of shape or concept to what what's her name did, Malabath. I'll just try to find one now that I can see that you can be like, that's not what this is not what we're looking for. Okay, here's one here. We got this one, Diaz.
Yeah.
Okay. You see straight away, this is slightly different. If you actually look at the shape of it, it's basically a triangle. I'll just go through there. So you can sort of see there, goes into a triangle shape. What that effectively means, if we go back to our little heart, if that was the heart, basically what the sides of the heart are basically, crushed in almost. And so the volume of blood that's going through with that sort of cardio is just significantly less. And yeah, we wouldn't, this is sort of horse that sometimes you see these sorts of horses that will end up being good as sort of 4 or 5 year olds. It takes them a long while to get them. So it's not a complete no, but for us, it's probably not the sort of heart that we'd be sort of saying, yeah, let's, it's got quite good volume to it. You can see the blood running around in the middle of it. Yeah, it wouldn't be the sort of heart that we'd be, interested in at yearling sales.
Yeah, that's great. That's really nice to see something like this when you're not used to it.
Yeah, the other answer to your question is we don't see the volume. So there's two other things. One is that we don't see a correlation between how that moves and maximal heart rate or that sort of stuff. So it's not like we can sort of say, yeah, this heart's going to be a 210 beat per minute cardio. We don't see that. As I said, there's a lot of different ways of being a good horse and a lot of different ways of different cardio types. So for what we're looking for one particular type of cardio, which is that sort of smaller, stronger. You can sort of see, but even, if you had a horse like, say a very good American dirt horse, we've got data on heaps of them. They get slightly bigger volume of cardio, so they get a slightly bigger cardio, mainly because dirt racing is extraordinarily tiring. So you need a bigger cardio to do race well on dirt in America. When we're collecting, Michael's answer to your question is we're collecting pre-purchase data at the yearling sales. I do it all. Do the whole thing at the yearling sales. We've got a machine learning model. An application, I put all the data in, and it does all the calculations. So it takes about 20 minutes to do it all. All the vendors seem to be fairly open as long as you're buying horses. It'd be a different thing if I was going to them and just sort of doing it for fun, but we're going in there to buy horses. So, at this stage, I mean, we don't, we've been doing it long enough, and we go in there and we buy horses and we do it. That I think the generally speaking vendors know that we're not there to play around. We're there to buy horses. So that's it there. I hope that answers your question, Michael. Have you done any research on the correlation between stride frequency and speed gene? Yeah. So, Tom, the answer to that question is no, mainly because we only buy one type of horse. We do the genetic markers ourselves on myostatin and PPR, GC1 alpha and various. There's a couple of genes that are involved in how far a horse wants to run. We buy horses, and the horses that we use Arianeo on are all one type of horse. So that's why I said very early on in this talk is that you've got to be mindful of the fact that we are only buying sprinters, and this data is primarily for sprinters that we've gathered data on. You may see a lot of difference in correlations between stride frequency and TT distance horses. I would suggest that they're probably going to be I think there'll also be some biomechanical things there. As I said, we're still working through that sort of data to work out the correlation between biomechanical features of a horse and how their stride frequency and stride length. But to answer your question, Tom, is that we because I'm trying to control as many variables as I want. There's so many different ways of being a good horse, and we're trying to control it down to finding one way of producing a good horse. So and that means that we select pretty hardly on DNA markers for sprinters. So What
I think, yeah. What are the priorities in terms of racehorse health and performance observed on the field that should be met in the years to come with tools such as the Equimeter?
So we do find it we haven't had any, major things come up. I'm sure that there is the ability to sort of, measure horses in terms of their possibility of them being, having bleeding EIPH or having sort of cardiovascular difficulties. Obviously, we haven't had any of that yet, touch wood. And but I do think that I think that that's, Charlotte, a very good point. We find it just, from our viewpoint, we can, that, as I say, that measurement to 120 beats per minute, we know when that has been a particularly stressful work for a young horse. That example of that horse that had that really high 224, we then backed off him for, the next 2 or 3 works were very easy for him, mainly because of that one being very stressful. And when we took that horse to the sales, that was Malabath, who had that measurement of 224 right before she went seconds to 120 beats per minute right before she went to the sales. So that was actually, I think, 13 days or 14 days before the sale. So we didn't work her in between. We basically just let her, because that was fairly stressful. So we do find that, yeah, the Arianeo gives us a chance to sort of say, okay, how stressful was that? And the jockeys can sort of say, oh, it was the horse, had a fair blow after the work and all that sort of stuff. But getting the actual hard data and being able to sort of say, yeah, that's actually what's occurred. We find, and we use it. We, obviously weigh the horses and do other things, but you're getting that hard data from Arianeo really helps us to sort of make that assessment. And I do think that long term, if you're in a training yard, certainly getting this data and being able to sort of say, when are you stressing this horse out too much? I mean, there's a sort of fine line between pushing the horse and getting him fitter and fitter and doing too much with them. In these young horses, we do find that 120 beats per minute seems to be the guide to sort of say that was a very stressful work for this young horse and when to back off them and take it a little bit easier with them. Yeah,
it helps you find comparison between every horses and every training, and that's helped to know which level of intensity level you want to reach.
Yeah. How do you feel this device could be best utilized in the US for 2-year-old training? So,
and on to the potential buyer. I'm reading for the replay, so everyone knows.
Yeah. So how do we have you found the individual data isn't great and can hurt horses' final sales price? Sherry, yes, is the short answer to that. But here's the thing, Sherry. I think that when you get to a 2-year-old sale, there are so many metrics at work. Like, people are doing gallop out times. They're looking at, measuring out stride frequency, stride lengths, a whole lots of different things at the yearling sales. You can't hide that bad horse. That's what the reality is. I mean, the one thing that they don't have is obviously their, how they've recovered, or how they've what sort of the breeze, what the effort's been like in terms of how much that has been, because that's measured obviously with the Arianeo. You can get we actually put them on at the 2-year-old sales, so we actually do use them during the I've busted 2 of them putting them on the 2-year-old sales. So we find it quite good for us to sort of say, look, we know our horses, and that's part of the thing is selling horses is you've got to know your horses. I mean, I don't think we don't go to the breeze up sales without the knowledge of what's what, and I think that you've got to be realistic about I always sort of say, like, our biggest problem is you can't hide a slow horse, is what it comes down to. I think that's where I think there's a group down in Australia that have been using them at the 2-year-old sales down there, the breeze up sales down in Australia, and have had good luck, good success doing it, because I think more information, providing buyers with as much information as they can it gives them more confidence in what you're bringing to the sales. So, Sherry, I don't have, I think it's a positive. I'd be using it. And as I say, I don't think you can hide a mediocre horse. It is what it is.
Thank you so much. I don't know if you have some question again. Anyway, you will be able to send your question to Byron and to us. I'm gonna just share the address here. Okay, so you can contact Byron at performancegenetics.com and Arianeo at sales@arianeo.com. If you have any more question, feel free to reach out. We'll be very, very happy to answer you and to continue to discuss this amazing topic that we discussed today. I don't know, Byron, if you want to add anything.
I think I've talked enough.
Yeah, thank you so much. That was great. I hope everyone enjoyed this topic and it gives you some ideas for the future and for the training, the racehorse trainings. Thank you so much. I think we're gonna, maybe if there are any last question, if not, I think that will be the end of the webinar. Thank you so much. And I hope to see you soon and to talk to you soon.